All right, so tonight we're going to talk about stress, and even trying to work with IT sometimes can be very stressful. So, um, as we all know, working with computers can be stressful, but I would say that that's probably not one of our major stressors today. Most people, if you watch the news for more than 10 seconds, read a newspaper or whatever, COVID is the thing that I think a lot of us have been stressed over for the last year and a half. And it doesn't seem like it's really getting easier on people. And so whether it be the stress of the illness itself or all the politics that come around with it, we know that stress is a significant part of our lives right now. But that being said, there's always stress in our lives. And I think that today what we want to talk about is stress. We want to talk about what we can do about it. We want to talk about are there things that a person can do to combat the effects of stress. We'll talk about how does stress impact our health in a negative way. We'll really spend a lot of time just giving you things that you could do to help you so that when you do have stress, which like I said, you're going to have stress, that's just life. How can you manage it? How can you help yourself to get through that stress the easiest? And so the first thing I think we want to start with is understanding that there really is two different types of stresses. There's things that stress us in a negative way, and then there's things that stress us in a positive way. Actually, the term for that is called eustress. And so if you look at weightlifting can be a very positive thing for our bodies. It can make our bodies healthy or stronger, make our muscles stronger. But what happens when we try to lift too much? What happens when our bodies aren't able to handle the stress is that we could tear something. So if you look at the picture on the right, the gentleman has actually tore his bicep. And I did that myself. I was doing a boxing class. The heavy bag swung the wrong way. I hit it at the same time, tore my bicep, and now it kind of looks like I'm permanently flexing my right bicep because it's kind of all balled up into a ball. Not quite as bad as what you see in that picture, but
Dr. Moreland, maybe it's
yeah.
just me, but I'm not able to see your pictures. I just see your background of your desktop.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not sure if
So,
you're sharing the right item.
yep, I'll slide this over. Sorry. Thank you for letting me know that. So I'm guessing it's because I'm on the wrong screen. So, all right. Does that
There you go. Yeah, we can see it now. Thanks so
cool?
much.
So you're probably wondering what the heck I was talking about. So, anyways, so as you look at these pictures, you'll see the gentleman on the left is doing things in a positive way, helping build his muscles. The guy on the left, though, probably tried to lift too much and it tore the tendon and the bicep balled up into his arm. And so, again, stress can be good. So you think about all the different things that can impact our stress. Um, they can impact us in a positive way. Could be anything from working hard to earn a promotion, could be actually getting sick, which allows your immune system to get stronger. So building your immune system up through being exposed to germs. There's a lot of different research on they call it the hygiene theory, where we become so afraid of germs that it's actually causing a lot more people to develop allergies and such. So there's a benefit to stress, but then, like I said, you can see that stress can be harmful to us as well. And really, what we're going to talk tonight about is what is the stress that is harmful, and how does that impact your health, and what can we do to combat that? So the first thing I think when you look at dealing with stress is, again, lots of it. There's lots of places we get exposed to it. Like I said, COVID-19 is a big one that many of us have been dealing with, or pretty much all of us have been dealing with for, over a year and a half, almost 2 years now. But like I said, there's other stressors in our world that can impact our health. So if you have children, have a job, marriage, relationships. Any one of those things can cause us to get stressed. And so there was a recent study published in the Journal of American Medical Association that really attributed about 85% of all chronic illnesses has stress at the root cause, or at least plays a major part in why that person developed that chronic health issue in the first place. So you can see in this picture how stress can impact all the different areas of the body, from skin. Hard to believe that it could be cause acne and other skin problems, but stress, and I'll go into a little detail on how that works, can really impact skin, muscle, joints, heart, stomach, pancreas, our intestines, reproductive system, immune system. And tonight we'll really talk about how it impacts the brain. But I do want to help you guys to understand what is going on in the body when a person is stressed. So again, thinking of stress as a negative thing. So if you think about it, let's just say that I'm up in Alaska. That's where Dr. Rob's from. If you guys know Dr. Rob, he's from Alaska. So let's say we're up there and we decide we're going to go on a fishing trip. We go down to the river and start casting our line in, not really paying attention to what's around us, start catching some salmon, and all of a sudden we look over and see, oh, wow, there's a bear there. So if you think about what's going to happen in your body at that moment, the first thing that's going to happen is your brain is going to register that there's danger. And so the first thing that happens then is you're going to stimulate these organs that are right above your kidneys here. They're called the adrenal glands. And when they do that, they release adrenaline. They're going to release adrenaline for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons is it's going to increase your heart rate. It's going to increase your blood pressure. It's going to increase your blood sugar. The reason you want those things is increasing your heart rate and your blood pressure allows you to circulate the blood faster. It allows it to circulate to parts of the body that need it, specifically your muscles. It's also going to, like I said, increase your blood sugar. The reason it's going to do that is it needs more fuel. Your different parts of the brain are going to get stimulated, but more the senses. So your eyesight's going to improve, your hearing. And the reason for this is all very intelligent. What your body's trying to do is it's trying to help you to get away from that bear. It's going to help you to either fight, flight, or freeze. And so it's going to do one of those three things, which is a good thing when you're being chased by a bear. The problem is what happens with a lot of us today is we're not necessarily being chased by a bear, but we got this work deadline, or we got children that are doing things that they're not supposed to be doing, or we may be facing a potential illness in our country. So these things, our body is going to respond the same way as if we were being chased by a bear, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing until it becomes a chronic thing. And that's what a lot of stress, what happens to a lot of people is it becomes a chronic stress issue. And then it creates these health issues. So if you think about it, if I have a raised blood pressure over a long period of time, we would call that heart disease. If I have raised blood sugar over a long period of time, we call that diabetes. If I have it where the only thing I can really get my brain to do is to be able to see and hear things, I'm actually going to have a hard time being able to focus and remember things. And so then I'm going to be diagnosed with a condition like ADD or ADHD. And so these chronic, these issues, when they become chronic issues, they become chronic health issues as well. And so again, not that stress is a bad thing, but when it becomes more of a thing where it impacts us in a negative way, it's a bad thing. And so again, it can really impact our brain, because I mentioned that it causes you to release adrenaline, but it also causes you to release cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone that allows us to increase our blood sugar. It also stimulates different parts of the body, which allows us to increase our blood pressure and such. And so if you look at this picture, what it's showing is the brain releases a hormone from the pituitary gland, which then goes down to the adrenal glands. Like I said, it releases adrenaline, but also releases that Cortisol. Cortisol, again, in a short period of time is a good thing. It allows you to get more blood sugar, allows you to do all these things that you need to do. But the problem is cortisol over a long period of time is really bad for you. And very specifically, it's really bad for your brain, a specific part of the brain called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is the place that we store or create from short-term memory into long-term memory. And so if you're familiar with Alzheimer's disease and some of the other dementias, types of dementias, they really impact the hippocampus. In fact, you can actually, they do studies to look at measure the size of someone's hippocampus. And this is something that I encourage people to do. If you are at a high risk for Alzheimer's disease, specifically Alzheimer's disease, you can actually get an MRI done where they'll measure your hippocampus, and then you can measure it on a regular basis. And you can see whether it's degenerating or getting smaller over time. And so that does happen for all of us, is that as we get older, that the hippocampus will shrink. But what we know is that to what degree, at what speed that should happen. So as you look at an MRI of somebody that's got Alzheimer's, it's really decreased in size a lot quicker than someone of that same age that doesn't have Alzheimer's disease. So it is a great test to get done. Typically, though, if you're going to do that, your insurance company is not going to pay for you to just go get that test done so you can measure it when there isn't a problem. But I do think it's worth the money, again, if you're at high risk. So the hippocampus is where we store or create our short-term to long-term memories. But if cortisol is present, it's going to actually cause that to deteriorate. And again, if you think about it in a stressful event like being chased by a bear, it actually makes sense that you would shut down that hippocampus, because you're not trying to create memories. That would just be a waste of time and energy to create a memory when you're trying to get away from a bear. So the one of the issues with stress in the brain is that it does create that cortisol, which impacts the hippocampus. But then the other thing that it does when you create that cortisol is you're constantly increasing blood sugar, which seems like, well, that doesn't seem like that's a bad thing. My brain uses blood sugar for fuel. But the problem is when you have that constant barrage of that, what happens is you start developing what we call insulin resistance, because in order to get that sugar into the cell, you need to have insulin to do so. So you release cortisol, it starts producing more sugar. It then takes that, needs to get that sugar out of its bloodstream. So then what you do is release insulin to do so. You keep doing that, you start becoming insulin resistant, and then you get what some people would call is type 3 diabetes, which is an insulin resistance in the brain where you can't utilize the sugar anymore in your brain. So that's a bad thing as well. So we can see that that just the release of cortisol can be a bad thing when it comes to impacting the brain. So as I am talking tonight too, if you guys have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask the question, or periodically I'll check the chat room, and you can just send me questions through that as well. But at this point, does anyone have any questions at all about how stress can impact our health in a negative way? All right, so I'm going to keep on going, but like I said, just please feel free to interrupt. I want this to be interactive, as if you guys have questions, if I'm not making sense, or if it's hard to understand, please just let me know, okay? All right, so there's a book by Robert Sapolsky called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And if you think about it, if you live the life of a zebra, what's happening is you're kind of in this constant, you live right beside lions, which is interesting that they choose to live so close together, but I think it's because there's not a lot of options for them to have food, and so lions just hang out where the zebras are. And so you think about it, zebras constantly have to be aware of and on the guard against lions. And so why don't these animals that deal with that why don't they get ulcers? So that's truly what the study was done on, looking at why animals don't. And one of the big reasons is that they're able to shut that stress off as soon as the stressor is removed. But because of the way we were created, our brains can dwell on things and we can keep thinking about things, and that stress can be there as a major stressor and then not go away, even though the major stressor might not be there anymore. We can still develop like stress and anxiety. And so one of the things that he talks about in the study is how impactful stress is on our health in a negative way. And they actually did a study up in Canada where they looked at people that were under chronic stress. And how they defined that was the person that was dealing with the same stressor for 3 months or longer. And they looked to see what kind of risk factors, health risk factors, they were developing due to that stress. And they actually found that they were at the same level of risk factors of someone that was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So if you look at how impactful stress can be on your body, it can literally be just as bad as if you were smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So it really plays a huge negative part in our health. And so that's why it is something that we absolutely need to deal with. And so you can think of like Bible verses like, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, in prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. We hear other Bible verses that talk about don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has its own troubles. You might hear people that, well, just relax and chill out. You see all these different things that tell us that we shouldn't be stressed, which I think is great and everything, but they're not necessarily telling us, well, what do we do about that? Although that Bible verse, we'll get to that back in Philippians 4:6, we'll get back to that, but because I do think it does tell us what we can do about it. But I think to just tell somebody to not be stressed, or just tell someone to chill out, to tell someone to just be calm, I think that that's not really equipping them by any means to help them to be able to help themselves. And so it's really important that we look at what can we do with the stress we have. And so I think one of the big things that we can do is most importantly, how do we deal with our stress? It's really about perspective. It's really about whether we feel like we have control over that stressor or not is actually a big factor when it comes to how much it impacts your health. So I read this book recently called Anti-Cancer. Great book if you get a chance to read it. It really talks about all the different ways that a person could try to reduce their risk of cancer. And the gentleman in the book, he had dealt with cancer himself, healed himself of cancer through the different techniques that he took. But one of the things that he quoted in the book was a study that they did on mice, and they did it related to stress and how stress can impact someone's risk for getting cancer. So they took 3 groups of mice. One group, what they did was they, well, all 3 groups, I should say, they took them and injected them with these cells that they know that when they inject these cells into mice, that 50%, real close to 50% of those mice will get cancer, for sure. That's something that they've studied enough that they know that because of the way they've manipulated the cell, 50% roughly will get cancer. So they had one group that all they did was inject those cells into them. They had another group where they injected the cells into them, and then they actually hooked them up to electrodes where they could shock the mouse, and the mouse could do nothing to stop those shocks. And then they had one group of mice where they did the same thing, where they hooked them up to electrodes and they could shock the mouse, but they taught the mouse that as soon as it feels the shock, that if it runs over and hits this bar, that it can stop the shocks. And so what they wanted to do is just see at the end of the study how that impacted the rate of cancer. And so they did the study. End of the study, the first group that they looked at, that all they did was inject those cancer cells. And really, I think it was like 49.8% or something of those mice got cancer. Then they looked at the group that they would shock, and they had no ability to stop the shocks, that they saw that it was about 83% of all those mice got cancer. So you can see that that went up significantly, 30 some percent. It went up from the control group because of the stressor of having that shock. And so then they looked at the third group to see, well, what impact did it have when the mouse could actually stop the stressor, or at least have control over that stressor. And so what they found was that the group that ended up having that control over the stressor, they saw that 42% of them got cancer. So not only did they see that it didn't increase the rate of cancer, in fact, if anything, it actually showed that it decreased the rate of cancer. So what you see there is that stress actually can have a positive impact on our health if we can see that we have control over that stressor. And that's what we saw with that mouse study, is that it's really important that when we look at stress, how we can control at least how we respond to the stressor. It really makes a big difference whether that's going to lead to chronic health issues or actually help us to actually prevent certain health issues. So I thought that study was very interesting, due to, I think most of us would have thought that, well, that third group probably still got a higher rate of cancer, but maybe not as high as the group that couldn't control their stressors. So really important, again, to know that there is stress in our lives. We're always going to have it. And so how we deal with it in our perspective is a really important thing. So like I said, you can go to any self-help section of the bookstore, go online, find self-help books. They're always telling us how we're going to get rid of stress, how we're going to stop the stress, how we're going to kill stress and get rid of it. But again, we don't want to do that just because we know that stress is actually really good for us. Unfortunately, what we're seeing in our world today is we're trying to teach people that how can we get you through life without any stress whatsoever? And we're not equipping people to even know how to handle minor issues, let alone major issues. And so I think it's really harmful to teach people that you just got to get rid of your stress, when really we know that that's never going to happen. What we want to do is look at, again, how do we handle and how do we take care of the stress that we have. So if you look at in the Bible, it talks about, in this world you'll have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And so it's really important that we look at in our world, there's always going to be stress. There are things we can do to reduce that stress, but there's always going to be something that happens. You could lose a loved one. You could have, like I said earlier, you could have an illness that's impacting the entire country happening. This isn't the first time this has ever happened in our world. And so we do need to look at that in this world, there will be trouble. How are we going to handle that trouble? So that's really what I want to spend the rest of the time tonight looking at. Again, didn't go into a lot of detail on how stress can impact the brain in a negative way. I don't want to go into all the science behind it, other than that cortisol is really bad for our brain. Having high blood pressure and high blood sugar is really bad for our brain. And so, and those are the things that stress cause. And that's why it's important to get a handle of the stress that we deal with in our world today. So at this point, any questions at all? All right, so stress, these are some of the things that I think that are, well, from studies to just things that we see in our office that work really well. These are just a list of the things, and I'm going to go into talking about each one of these things, about how a person can go ahead and handle those stressors. So like I said, you can reduce stress. Trying to eliminate stress out of your life, I think, is a bad idea, because we know it does have benefits to us. I think the perspective that we have on our stress is a really important thing. Breathing exercises can be very helpful for our stress. Sleep exercise, prayer, meditation, grounding. I'll talk more about what that truly is. Eating healthy. These are just some of the things. I know that there's a lot more things that a person can do that can help with stress. But these are the ones I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about each one of these ways to reduce our stress or ways to handle our stress. So reducing stress, I think that I would say that there's a lot of different thoughts on what we can do to reduce our stress. Like I said, you can read tons of books on it. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but I think some of the big ones that that we can look at is just looking at some of the reasons why we put ourselves, like we get ourselves into stressful situations. Procrastination can be a really big one. We can be waiting to the last minute to do things. I just had a patient today, though, that said, hey, I do best when I'm under pressure. I do best when I'm have a deadline and I'm kind of working right up to that last minute. So I think that when you look at people, we have to see that not all of us function the same way. I would not do well with that. I would much rather get something done as soon as it's assigned or as soon as I need to do it. Good example, yesterday we just flew back in from Arizona, and my wife and her sister, they have no problem showing up to the airport 3.5 hours earlier than your flight, because then they feel like, hey, I can just relax, I can get there and I can kind of settle in. Where myself, I'd personally rather get to the airport like the second that they're telling everybody that this is the last call for boarding. So I have no problem just being able to run right in and jump on the plane. But my wife and her sister don't like that. So I felt like in order to have a great marriage, I just let my wife, we show up 3 hours early for the airport. So really, again, procrastination can be a problem for some people, but waiting to the last minute for some can be not stressful at all. So that's one of the big ones I think that a person could do to reduce stress. One of the things that I do is I really schedule out my day. I have my day planned. I know the day ahead what I'm gonna be doing. So again, for me, that really helps reduce my stress. For some other people, they might think, wow, that's super stressful to have to live, knowing what you have to do every hour of the day, that kind of thing. So again, I don't want to go into great detail then about all the different ways to reduce stress, because as you can see just by those two examples, that that when it comes to how we reduce stress, deal with stress, it's different for each person. So, but that is a really important thing, to try to reduce the amount of stress that we have in our lives, but again, not to try to eliminate the stress in our lives. The next thing is perspective. So as you look at this picture, kind of be interactive here. How many of you see an old lady in this picture? Does anybody see an old lady in the picture? So how about a young lady? Does anybody see a young lady in the picture? Yeah, so some people see the young lady, some people, one person said that they can actually see both. Yeah, so I'll outline it so you can see, because we're all looking at the same picture, and some of us can see both, if you've ever seen this picture before, and some of us can see just the young lady and some can see just the old lady. But I'll outline it. I think, can you guys, hopefully you can see my cursor of my computer. So this here is the old lady's chin. This is her mouth, this is her nose, and then her eye right here. And then this is her hair and like a bonnet right here. So again, this is her chin, her mouth, her nose, and an eye. So if you look for the young lady, this is her neck. This is like a necklace or a choker type of chain that she's wearing. This is her chin, and she's looking away from us. So that's her eyelash and that's her nose. So as you look at this, again, we can see looking at the same picture, but we can, from our perspective, might see the young lady or might see the old lady. So when it comes to stress, I think one of the things that you really have to look at is what perspective are they looking at uh, the world at. We look at right now with COVID, a great issue that we have going on right now is whether you should or should not get vaccinated. So if your perspective is that, hey, there's this bug that's out there, our body's not strong enough to be able to take care of that, these vaccines have done a good job of getting rid of other illnesses like smallpox and measles. Why wouldn't you want to get rid of the virus by just getting everybody vaccinated? So that could be one person's perspective. Another person's perspective is, well, I do believe my body's created to be able to deal with these illnesses. I do believe that there is harmful things that can be in those vaccines. I do believe that the vaccine could create an immune response that really isn't a typical immune response. It might be creating more of an allergic type of immune response. How they grow these viruses can be very unethical, and that the people that are doing this behind the scenes are really just in it for the power and the money. And so those are the two different, probably the biggest perspectives that we have. And so it creates a lot of arguments because, like, well, I'm doing this for the greater good, and the person against the vaccine believes they're doing it for the greater good. So they both believe that, but yet their perspective is significantly different. And so what we end up with is we have a hard time seeing other people's perspective, and what we're seeing today especially is people don't even want to listen to each other's perspectives on why they're made that choice. And so literally just had this talk with my dad today. My dad's response was like, I follow science. I don't follow, basically he didn't say he follows like anything else, but if you're not for it, then you're just not following science. So that's his perspective. So it's very, creates a lot of stress in our world. That's just one example. And you can see anywhere from how you should discipline your children to what school your children should go to you name it. So there's a lot of things that we have different perspectives on. So I think it's really important that we do spend time understanding people's perspectives and then looking at our own perspective. Why is this stressing me out? Why is it stressing me out to go up on top of a building and look down because I'm afraid of heights, whereas one person, like, that's their job and they love washing windows or whatever, and so they're hanging out all day long on the side of a building. So again, it's really important that we look at how do we perceive the where we're at, what event we're in, how is that impacting us. So perspective is a really big thing, and I think that how do we deal with that is, one is listening to other people's perspectives, but then just understanding, why do I have this different, why am I approaching this way? So perspective is a big thing. So next thing that we can do is to help with our stress levels is what we call box breathing. I don't know if anyone's done this, but I figure we may as well just do it together so we can experience it. So what I want to do is just spend, about a minute of us doing this box breathing. And really what it is it's breathing in on a count of 4 seconds. So you breathe in for 4 seconds. You're going to hold it for 4 seconds. You're going to breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you're going to hold it for 4 seconds. So what you'll do is take a deep breath in, counting to 4. You'll hold it for 4 seconds. You'll breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you'll hold it before you take another breath for 4 seconds. If 4 seconds is too long, then you can do 3 seconds or even 2 seconds, but being very intentional about your breathing. So what I want you to do is just go ahead and take a deep breath in and counting to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then what I want you to do is hold it for 4 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. breathe out for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go ahead and breathe in again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for 4 seconds. So as you do this, one of the things you can do is do what we call diaphragmatic breathing. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Diaphragmatic breathing is you put your hand on your stomach. Go ahead and hold that for 4 seconds. Put your hand on your stomach. When you breathe in, your hand should raise up. So breathe in for 4 seconds. We'll do this one more time. Now hold it for 4 seconds. And go ahead and breathe out for 4 seconds. And then just go ahead and hold that for 4 seconds without breathing in again. And what that does is it allows us to just really be intentional about our breathing. It allows us to get more oxygen from our breath. It teaches us to do more, like I said, diaphragmatic breathing, which is dropping your diaphragm when you breathe in versus, that whole bringing your chest up when you breathe can actually stop you from taking in as deep breath as you possibly can. So that breathing can be really good because it gives us oxygen, but I think also it really slows us down because a lot of us can be chest breathers. We really just take short breaths all day long, and we really don't take in that deep breath that we should. So box breathing is just one example of breathing techniques that can help you to deal with your stress. Now, I'm like anybody else that when I'm in a major stress, like say someone cuts you off and you're driving home from work, quick reaction can be, I just want to get mad. And my first reaction is not like, oh, I should just stop and do some box breathing. But I think that if you are intentional about it, what happens is you can get to a point where that does become more like a reflex versus just having that knee-jerk reaction of getting angry. So box breathing can be really good. Sleep, cannot stress enough how much sleep impacts our health. And so lots of good books on it. I think Sleep Well is probably one of the best books out there. One of the things they really talk about in that book is having good sleep hygiene. And that is one of the talks that we're going to do in the future, is just helping people how they can sleep better. But as you look at this diagram, you can see all the different things that I think a lot of people don't even think about. Keeping the room as dark as possible, keeping the temperature of the room at a good temperature. Don't do anything stimulating. One thing my wife and I have a hard time with is at nighttime, I can just go to bed, close my eyes and fall asleep. She gets in bed and starts thinking of all the 1,000 things that she needs to do the next day, starts thinking of all the things that kind of processing the day. And really, I try to tell her that's like the worst time to do that is right before you're trying to fall asleep, because it gets your brain going. So you really have to be disciplined. If you have a hard time shutting off your brain, you do have to be disciplined in that you got to figure a way to do something that would get those thoughts out of your mind before you go to bed. Like maybe it's writing them down on a piece of paper, doing it earlier in the evening, not waiting right till you get to bed. And so, but it does require discipline if that's you, that your brain starts racing right before you go to bed, which is the case for a lot of people, but you just have to have a routine so that you can avoid that. So like I said, you can see that there's a lot of different things that a person can do for sleep hygiene, and that is something that we're going to talk about in the future, because sleep is super important. Exercise. Exercise helps with stress, even though it is a stressor on our body. And the reason why it helps with stress is because of the hormones that are released when we are exercising. What it does is it releases endorphins. It releases other neurotransmitters that help our brain to be focused more, but also just calm us down, so that after the exercise, it can calm us down for hours afterwards. The other thing it does is it helps with blood sugar control. It helps with keeping our blood pressure down. So it helps us that even when we do have stress, we don't have quite that same response as somebody else that's not as healthy. And so exercise is a really important thing to do for managing our stress. And I would say because people ask me this all the time, like, well, what type of exercise? And I would say that the exercise that you find that's the most enjoyable is probably the right exercise. So maybe it's playing a sport, but if that sport makes it so that you're stressed afterwards, all you can think about is all the things you did wrong in that sport, then I would say that wouldn't be the good thing to do. But for some people, it's really relaxing to do a sport. For some people, it might be doing cardio. It might be doing like weight training. It might be doing martial arts, or it may not have anything to do with being at a gym. It could literally be going out for a walk in nature. It could be gardening, those kind of things, because those are exercise, even though we don't tend to think of them as exercise because we're not at the gym, but they are very healthy for us. They keep our bodies active. And so really looking for the one, like when it comes to exercise, what helps me to be a good stress release, not causing stress. So exercise is another thing that can really help with stress. Prayer. So I mentioned Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. So I really think it's important that, because I think that a lot of people will say this verse, they'll say, well, don't be anxious about anything. But it doesn't really go into the, well, how do I handle it? But that verse does. And I think the big one that I think people kind of skip over, they see, well, by prayer and supplication, so I should pray and ask God. But I also see that it says to be with thanksgiving. And I think a lot of us, when it comes to things in our life that are stressful, it's very hard to be thankful for those things. But I would say that if you can, again, when you look at perspective, I think that a lot of things, even though we're going through a trial or a hard time, we can look at them, especially if we look back at them. A lot of them we can look back at and actually say, hey, I'm really thankful that I had to go through that because of who I became because of that. And so I think that that's really important, that we don't skip over that Thanksgiving. And so I get there's times that are very stressful. You lose a loved one. It's like, wow, how can I be thankful that, say my child died, or how can I be thankful that my favorite grandparent died? But we can be thankful, not that they died, but we can be thankful that we know where they're going. We can be thankful that we got to spend that time with them. We can be thankful for the memories that we have with them. And so it's really important to take that perspective and take that Thanksgiving, because I think that plays a huge role. When we are in gratitude, we're much more likely to have less stress than when we're angry and bitter about something. So I think that verse tells us everything we should be doing when we're anxious. And it's not just prayer and supplication, but it's also being thankful for what we're in. But prayer is definitely an important part of dealing with stress. So another one could be meditating. Now, there's lots of different ways to meditate. I'm a Christian, as you can tell from the verses that I'm using. When you look at different practices of meditation, I would actually encourage you, because you'll hear of some meditation where they want you to clear your mind, just empty out your thoughts and such. And I think that's really hard for us to do. I think that can be almost dangerous doing that, because I think what can happen is we can have some of that kind of those worst thoughts creep into our minds, and that's not what we want. And so I'd rather focus on something that's positive, whether it be scripture, or people talk about doing affirmations, meditating on something rather than just trying to clear the mind and meditate on nothing. This is my own personal belief. I think we should be meditating on something specific, and as a Christian, I think it should be on God's word, because God's word won't return void. And so really important that we are, when we're meditating, that we are focusing on things that are good and true. So really important part of stress release can be meditating. For some people, that can be very hard. I know when I've done it, sometimes I literally just fallen asleep, which I don't think is a bad thing, but wasn't really what I was intending to do. But meditation can be a really good way to deal with our stress. And so then I talked about earthing or grounding. And so there's different thoughts on why walking in nature barefoot is helpful. For sure, just being out in nature is really good. Being out in God's creation, just seeing God's beauty. My wife and I, Natalie and I, we were just in Arizona for the weekend. So we got to do some hikes. I think this is maybe up in Sedona. Um, I can't remember if that's Sedona, but we did some other hikes right around Phoenix. We did uh, Camelback, and we did another one called Tom's Thumb. But anyways, being out in that creation just is so cleansing. About a month or so ago, we went to Las Vegas, and we're not huge fans of Las Vegas, but really huge fans of the stuff around Las Vegas, some hiking and such. So we'd spent some time downtown Las Vegas. And then the next day we went out hiking, and it just felt like spiritual cleansing being out in God's creation. And so being out hiking, just a great way to deal with stress. But grounding and earthing, the concept behind it is that the body and then earth creates electrons, and there's electrons that are transferred from the earth to our bodies when we're walking in nature. We know that from when lightning hits the ground, it does transfer electrons to the earth. And so a lot of different books are written on it, documentaries on it, but can be really actually healing to be walking in nature. And so whether it's true, it's electrons or not, I can't say for sure, but I can say that there is actually a lot of studies on it that actually show that that is why. But definitely, even if it's not, you're out in God's creation and you're enjoying God's creation, and just touching God's creation is a really important thing. So it can really help with our stress levels. And then healthy eating. So healthy eating, why can that be really helpful for us? I would say that one of the biggest reasons is it helps your body's hormone system to create the right hormones. It helps your body to release endorphins as well. It also helps our body to have good blood sugar control, helps our bodies to have our brains work the way they're supposed to. So when our brains work the way they're supposed to, we don't create anxiety and anxiousness. And so eating healthy for each one of us can look different. So we did a talk not too long ago on eating healthy and the brain. And so when you look at eating healthy, for some people it might be being a vegetarian. So for some people it might be paleo. For some it might be keto. We talk about that in the video, why keto is so important for brain health. But it's not the only way to eat to be healthy. In fact, my belief is that we should have such a variety that maybe some days you are keto, some days you're a vegetarian, some days you're paleo. So that variety is really good for our overall health. And so eating healthy can help us directly to deal with stress, and it can really help us indirectly to deal with our stress. So really important that we're eating healthy foods. So these are just some of the examples of things that we could do to deal with our stress. I think having good relationships is good. I think being in communion with people is good. I don't mind doing these Zoom talks. Love the convenience of them, but honestly, talking to people in person is a much better way, in my opinion, to communicate and to do these talks, just because the interaction is better. And then just being present with people, I think, is important. I am definitely not a fan of doctor visits through Zoom and such, because again, I think there's something about being knee to knee with your patient or with your doctor that you gain from being in person that you just can't recreate through technology. Again, love the idea that we can do this and it's convenient, but personally, I think that if we want to handle our stress better, I think it's really important that we actually are in person with each other. So good relationships can be really helpful for us. Like I said, communion with other people can also help us with our stress levels. They can also increase our stress levels as well. And so that's why, again, learning how to deal with that, learning how to be able to have disagreements with people that aren't conflict, but actually are just conversations. Again, I think that our society has lost the ability to do that, to be able to debate and be able to have conversations with people, even if we don't agree on what we're talking about. So how we deal with our stress can be really important. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. We don't know how to deal with it. And so the last one I want to talk about is working with a health coach. This is a picture of Elizabeth Miller, who works in our office. She is a health coach in our office. And what she tries to do is help people that are trying to make those changes in their life, trying to, whether it be dealing with stress or maybe they went and saw Dr. Rob and they were put on an AIP diet, which that in and of itself is stressful, but then just not even having a clue what to do, how to do it, how am I going to do this? That's where a health coach can really come in handy. And so a health coach doesn't just tell people like, here's what you should do to lose weight, because I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of a health coach. A health coach really works with your overall health and not just looking at what you should be putting into your body as far as food, but also how your thoughts impact your health, how you can deal with your stress and such. So Elizabeth has been just a great asset in our office to be able to help people with that. So again, we're not going to get rid of all the stress in our lives. We're going to have stress. We can minimize that stress. We can reduce it, but we're not going to get rid of it completely. And again, I don't think that we should get rid of it, because having stress in our lives actually does produce good things in our health as well. But then looking at the different things that you can do to help reduce that stress, because stress does impact our brain in a significant way. And when you look at the studies that Dr. Dale Bredesen is doing when it comes to specifically with Alzheimer's disease, he is seeing that the interventions that he's doing, and one of them is looking at people's stress levels, is seeing people either slow down their ability to, like, so slowing down the risk of Alzheimer's, even reversing it in some people, and in some people potentially preventing it altogether. And so if we can do that, we can really help people to not go down that path of dealing with dementia, specifically with Alzheimer's disease. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. We're going to keep doing these talks, but so that you guys can keep learning on ways that you can help with your brain health. But before we end tonight, do you guys have any questions that you have regarding stress or anything related to that?
I don't have any questions, but just thank you. It was very helpful.
Cool. So anyone else questions at all?
I'm wondering if the recording will be available later. I had a bunch of technical difficulties for about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
15
no.
minutes before I could get logged in.
Yeah, so what I've recorded it, and then we'll upload it to our YouTube channel. And so I don't know if you've ever been to our YouTube channel, but it's just Vallejo Health and Wellness Center. So it'll be up on our YouTube channel in probably the next day or so.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, hopefully you guys will be able to join us on the next talk. I can't remember what the next one in the series that we're going to be doing. But we've done ones that are previous ones that are up on our YouTube channel, so you can watch them on that as well. And if you find it helpful, know people that are dealing with this, definitely share it with others, as we really, our main goal is to give hope to those people that have lost hope. And I definitely see when it comes to dementia, specifically Alzheimer's disease, is that most people feel that it's inevitable that I'm going down that path if I have family members that are dealing with that. So, all right, well, you guys have a great rest of your night, and God bless.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.